August 17, 1896, a summer afternoon at the Crystal Palace in London. A 44-year-old woman named Bridget Driscoll has come down from Croydon with her teenage daughter May and her friend Elizabeth Murphy to watch a dancing display. Halfway across a stretch of ground called Dolphin Terrace, something she has almost certainly never seen before comes toward her, and she stops. The accounts all describe the same thing, a woman standing still, bewildered, as it closed the distance. It was traveling at 4 miles an hour, slower than you walk. It killed her. She is remembered as the first pedestrian in history killed by a car, and almost everything people assume about that moment is wrong. When you hear the first car crash, you picture speed, a machine out of control, some reckless young man, an accident nobody could have prevented. None of that is what happened. The car was crawling, the driver was there on purpose, doing his job, and there was a warning issued that day, in a courtroom, in plain English, by a man whose entire profession was explaining deaths to the living. It was heard, it was written down, it was printed in newspapers, and then it was ignored about 4 million times in one country alone. Start earlier, because Bridget Driscoll wasn't even first. 27 years before Crystal Palace, on the 31st of August 1869, a woman named Mary Ward was riding through Parsonstown, Ireland, the town now called Burr. Ward was not just a passenger, she was a scientist, a microscopist, an astronomer, an illustrator good enough to be published at a time when almost no woman in Britain or Ireland was published at all. The vehicle carrying her was an experimental steam carriage built by her own cousins, the sons of the Earl of Ross. It was moving at an easy pace. It came to a corner. It jolted. Mary Ward was thrown from her seat into the road, and the machine's iron wheels went over her. She died almost immediately. The first person known to be killed by a motor vehicle anywhere in the world. Killed by a machine her own family built, while she was riding in it as their guest. There was no investigation into the vehicle. There was no law written afterward. The steam carriage was quietly put away, and that was the end of it. Because in 1869, there was nothing to change it into. Britain governed these machines under the Locomotive Acts, what everyone called the red flag laws. Any self-propelled vehicle on a public road needed a crew of 3, and one of those 3 had to walk 60 yards out in front of it, on foot, carrying a red flag, warning the world that it was coming. 2 miles an hour in town, 4 in the countryside. It sounds ridiculous now. It was also, in practice, a speed limit written in human beings. The motor industry hated it. For 30 years they campaigned to have it lifted, and in the summer of 1896 they won. The Locomotives on Highways Act received royal assent on the 14th of August 1896. The walking man was gone. The red flag was gone. The limit went to 14 miles an hour. 3 days later, Bridget Driscoll stepped onto Dolphin Terrace. The car that struck her belonged to the Anglo-French Motor Carriage Company. It wasn't racing anywhere. It was there to sell the future, one of several cars giving demonstration rides around the grounds, so the public could see for themselves that these things were perfectly safe. The driver was Arthur James Edsall of Upper Norwood. At the inquest, the accounts didn't match. One witness said the car came on at a reckless pace. In fact, like a fire engine. Edsall said he was doing 4 miles an hour, that he had rung his bell and shouted. A cab driver who examined the machine afterward testified it couldn't have exceeded 4.5 miles an hour if it tried. The engine belt had been deliberately set to hold the speed down for the demonstrations. The inquest lasted 6 hours. The jury returned a verdict of accidental death. Nobody was prosecuted, nobody was fined. The company went on giving rides, and then the coroner spoke. His name was Percy Morrison. He said he hoped such a thing would never happen again. That's it. That's the warning. No mandate, no law, no penalty. One sentence from a man who had just spent 6 hours listening to how a machine moving slower than a jog killed a woman who could not understand what she was looking at. 3 months later, the industry threw a party. On the 14th of November, 1896, the day the new act came into force, 30 vehicles set off from London to Brighton in what the organisers called the Emancipation Run. A red flag was torn up at the start line for the cameras. That drive is still rerun every single year. Bridget Driscoll had been dead for 89 days. America wasn't waiting either. 3 months before Crystal Palace, on the 30th of May, 1896, a man named Henry Wells drove a Duryea motor wagon, the first American car built and sold to the public, down what was then called Western Boulevard in New York City. Today it's Broadway. Near 74th Street, the wagon went zigzag, and Wells struck a young cyclist named Evelyn Thomas. She went to the hospital with a broken leg. He spent the night in a jail cell. First recorded automobile accident in the United States. 3 years later, on the 13th of September 1899, a 69-year-old real estate dealer named Henry Hale Bliss stepped down from a streetcar at Central Park West, at 74th Street, and was struck by an electric taxicab driven by Arthur Smith. He died the next morning, the first person killed by a car in America. Same street, 3 years apart, and in between, nothing had changed. Here is where the warning actually ends up. Between 1899 and 2023, cars killed 3,996,709 people in the United States. Not injured. Killed. That is more people than live in the city of Los Angeles, and it is one country. Worldwide, the World Health Organization now counts about 1.19 million road deaths a year. More than 2 every minute. For every human being on Earth between the ages of 5 and 29, it is the single leading cause of death. Not disease, not violence, traffic. So it would be easy to end this by saying nobody listened. But that isn't quite true either. Everything that keeps you alive inside a car exists because somebody refused to accept accidental death as the end of the sentence. The seatbelt, the crumple zone, the windshield that shatters into pebbles instead of blades, brake lights, mirrors, the inspection somebody runs on a used car before it's allowed to be sold to a stranger. Every one of those started as a death that somebody decided was unacceptable. That's the real lesson from Dolphin Terrace. The warning wasn't ignored because people are careless. It was ignored because a warning with nothing behind it, no law, no check, nobody accountable, is just a sentence in a newspaper. What makes a warning mean anything is somebody doing the boring work afterward. Checking, inspecting, putting their name on it. It is the least dramatic part of this entire story. It's the only part that has ever saved anybody. Bridget Driscoll was 44 years old. Her daughter was standing beside her. The car was moving at 4 miles an hour, and the man who watched them carry her away said he hoped it would never happen again. 4 million times we proved him wrong.